Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This issue does seem to be quite wrapped up in the issue of drug shortages, and I serve on the Finance Committee with Senator Rockefeller as well, and the Finance Committee held a hearing last fall on the topic of drug shortages, and one issue that came up was the current pricing structure in Medicare for injectable medications that uses average sales price. And I'm wondering if anybody would like to comment about whether you think that drug shortage issues can be attributed in any way to the pricing structure within Medicare.
Senator Thune, I can tell you from the community pharmacy perspective that there's reimbursements for products both in Medicare and Medicaid come down. You tend to see some of the suppliers get driven out of the market because as the pressure is put on us, we try to put the pressure on them. And as they get driven out of the market because of the pricing pressures, you will see manufacturers leave the market, which may create a shortage situation. So we do think reimbursement policy in Medicare and Medicaid can have a direct effect on at least pharmacies' abilities to buy certain medications because, I mean, if the manufacturers are not able to recoup some of their investments and maintain all the processes they need to comply with federal regulations, they may just leave the market or go out of business. So we agree that reimbursement can have a direct impact on short supply drugs.
Yeah. And it also seems as if part of the problem stems from questions about the supply chain, which you mentioned, and I'm curious as to whether you could give your opinion on what measures might be taken to tighten that supply chain. Anybody want to take a stab at that?
Sure.
Ms. Harrell.
Well, Ginny, why don't you go first, and then I'll...
You know I was reaching for that microphone.
In.
In California, we have on the books that will take effect in 2015 on a staggered basis out to 2017 and a half, an electronic pedigree requirement that must start with the manufacturer. Every change of ownership has to be certified into the electronic pedigree. And not only just the change of ownership, the seller certifies into the pedigree that it sold the product to the specific buyer. The buyer specifically certifies to the seller that it's buying the product. That's creating a chain of custody. And thus, when we as a regulator walk in and scan a product, we can see everywhere that product's been. And if there should be a gap in suddenly where the drug was acquired from, for example, we know that the point prior to that is where the introduction occurred. And so it allows us to police the distribution of drugs in California as well as across the nation, because federal regulators are going to be looking at this too, that they can use in investigations, because once that product goes across state lines, it's very difficult to track. And there are rings of these things set up, much like what the FBI did in New York last week. Those products are moving from one location to another location, but almost always across multiple state lines, so it's virtually impossible to track them as a state regulator.
How many states have electronic pedigrees?
We are the only state that has the depth of the requirement that we have. And it is a complex process
to get there?
Yeah, it really is. But without that, you need to put the onus on each member of the supply chain to certify they're a legitimate and ethical buyer, and you do that every time you buy or sell a product. Because without that, people will slip things in and you won't be able to do anything about it. And regrettably, it needs to be done at the unit level, much like the FedEx tracking is. You have to track every single one of those packages, or else you don't know where it is or where it's been.
Okay. Anybody else? Mr. Gray.
In our organization, we've been working with Ginny for 6 or 7 years, back to the development of the California law, and most recently at the direction of the Congress here for a uniform federal pedigree. Our position has been, since the adoption of California, that what we need is a federal system. It's not enough to do something in California. Our members dealing in all 50 states need some consistency in the business process by which we ship drugs into every state. And Florida, for example, has a completely different paper-based pedigree system, quite different from California's, but nonetheless it's a pedigree system. So we have been proponents of hopefully getting the Congress to approve a national uniform pedigree system and work out the technology requirements to do that. But our members have been advocating this since 2004. And we got perilously close a month ago, and we're not giving up the fight on this one yet. We think this can have a large impact, just as Ginny described, as far as how we can keep an eye on all 6 of those steps and know where these drugs have been and whose hands they've exchanged, for security reasons as well as cost.